Okay, let's go.
All right, so our research was on how student debt impacted career choices. I'm Jaden.
I'm Zach.
I'm Haley.
Jimmy.
Um, Imagine graduating college with over $16,000 in student loan debt. Would you choose your dream job or the one that pays the most? The average student in our study carries over $16,500 in loan debt, and that financial pressure is already shaping the careers that they choose. Today we're looking at student loan debt and how it is rapidly increasing for the college students and recent graduates, and how the debt has nearly doubled since 2008. We focus on how this debt impacts students, career choices, and the pressure they feel when deciding their future paths. Our study looks at the relationship between debt, career options, and financial stress. In this presentation, we will go over existing research, our collected data, and our main findings and conclusions within this. Our background: student loan debt has become a major national issue with Americans now owing over $1.6 trillion in total student loan debt, and then that number has increased by about 42% over the last decade, showing how quickly debt levels have grown. Both of these stats have come from the Pew Research Center talking about student loan debt. And then one of the main reasons for this increase is rising tuition costs in universities. Tuition costs has gone up extraordinarily in that time, and it directly correlates to why everyone is borrowing more money. And then the purpose of this study is to analyze how student loan debt impacts students' career decisions after graduation. We also aim to determine how levels of debt are directly related to financial stress and anxiety. And then another goal is to examine how financial worry connects to income expectations and future growths. And overall, this study helps us understand how debt influences major life decisions and career choices.
Okay, so moving into the hypotheses. So to guide our research, we focused on two main hypotheses to help us understand how student loans shape life after college, not just financially, but emotionally and professionally. Our first hypothesis looks at the career side of things. It proposes that when a student graduates with higher levels of loan debt, they're more likely to pursue higher income careers. And that idea really reflects what a lot of students experiences. When you've already started out in the negative, it becomes harder to choose a career based purely on passion or personal interest. Instead, there's this subtle but constant pressure to choose something that pays well, something that feels safe, or something that can realistically support loan payments. So hypothesis one is really about how debt nudges students towards certain career paths, not necessarily because they want to, but because they feel like they have to. Our second hypothesis shifts to a more emotional impact. It suggests that simply expecting the need for higher income in the future increases anxiety about post-graduation financial stability. And this is important because the stress doesn't start after graduation, it starts long before that. Students begin worrying about whether they'll make enough, whether they'll be able to afford rent, or whether their first job will cover their payments. That anticipation alone creates a kind of background anxiety that follows them through the final years of school. So hypothesis two highlights how financial expectations, not just the debt itself, can shape students' mental and emotional well-being. Together, these two hypotheses give us a fuller picture. One looks at how debt influences the choices students make, and the other looks at how it affects the stress they carry while preparing for the future. And that combination is really what our study aims to explore. So moving into some existing research, when we look at existing research, we see a really clear path that lines up with both of our hypotheses. One example comes from the 2025 Mission Square Research Institute report, The Ripple Effect of Student Debt. They found that students who have a loan debt are significantly more likely to choose higher paying careers. 56% in the public sector and 62% in the private sector. That's a huge indicator that debt isn't just a background factor, it's always shaping the direction students take after graduation. This directly supports our first hypothesis, which proposes that higher levels of student loan debt push students towards a higher paying career path. We also see strong evidence for our second hypothesis from outside sources, which focus on financial anxiety. A large-scale study from the Department of Human Science at Ohio State surveyed 25,310 students, and the results were pretty striking. Students with higher loan debt reported significantly higher levels of financial stress, even when accounting for things like savings or personal support systems. This tells us that it's not just debt itself, it's the expectation of needing a higher income in the future that creates anxiety about financial stability after graduation. Students are already thinking ahead, and the anticipation alone is enough to increase stress levels. The existing research paints a consistent picture. Student debt influences both the career students feel they can pursue and the level of financial stress they feel while making those decisions. And that is exactly what our study is aiming to explore. Okay, so for the survey design and data collection, for our data collection, we obviously used the Qualtrics survey. It had around 20 questions. Students could access it by clicking a link that we had or scan a QR code, and we used the snowball approach so it could spread through the different student networks. We asked a range of questions, things like how much student loan debt they currently hold or expect to take on, how often they feel financial stress, and how much debt influences their career decision, to capture both measurable trends and personal perspectives. And then once all the respondent responses were collected in Qualtrics, we exported it into an SPSS where we cleaned, organized, and finalized the data set. That gave us a reliable foundation for analyzing patterns and intercepting our results.
Alright, so our data set concluded of 120 college students. So our age range was 18 to 25 years old with an average age of 21 years. So our gender distribution model, it shows that a majority was 65.8% for male respondents, and then female respondents was 34.2%. This indicated a slightly unbalanced, but still a very useful sample. So among participants with student loan debt, their average debt was around $16,531. So this suggested a moderate financial burden, but the overall trends showed that most students somewhat agree they feel pressure to choose higher paying careers. There's a general pattern or increased focus on salary and job stability, and students are likely to prioritize passion-based careers when financial pressure is higher. So these descriptive results provide a general snapshot of the sample, highlighting key averages and pattern without testing relationships or significance yet. So moving on to our regression analysis, this is where we look at what actually causes what. So our model explains about 62% of why students feel job pressure. So that 62% comes from our model summary, which is under the R square. And so this shows that we're capturing most of what influences their careers and decisions. So what we found was actually really interesting. So while student loan debt plays a huge role, it was not our strongest predictor. So instead, students' expectations about needing a higher income and their overall financial mindset had a bigger impact on the pressure they feel when choosing a career. So when we look at financial anxiety, job pressure itself becomes the biggest driver. So as students feel more pressure to choose higher paying jobs, their anxiety about the future also increases. So overall, this suggested that it's just not about the amount of student loan debt people have, but how they think about their financial future that really shapes their decisions and stress levels. And so overall, our key findings show that student loan debt plays an important role in shaping students' careers, decisions, and stress levels. So many students reported feeling pressure to choose higher paying and more stable jobs, rather than careers based purely on passion. So this suggested that financial responsibility is a major factor during this stage of life. However, one of the most important insights from our analysis is that it's not the amount of debt that matters. What really stands out is the students' expectations about needing a higher income, and their overall financial mindset have an even stronger influence on their decisions. So in other words, students are not only reacting to their current debt, but also how they view their financial future. This leads to career choices being driven more by financial security than personal interest. It also contributes to higher levels of stress and anxiety after graduation.
Yeah, so this shows that financial pressure does affect how students think about their careers, especially when they're planning for the future. A lot of students start thinking more about stable jobs and higher incomes instead of just focusing on what they enjoy. So financial security becomes a big part of their decision making. We also notice that stress isn't about current money problems, it's more about what students think their financial situation will look like after graduation. And because of that, we think schools can help by teaching more about finances early on. They can also help better explain how scholarships and financial aid could help reduce some of that pressure. And in conclusion, many students feel pressure to choose higher paying and more stable jobs instead of careers being based on passion. However, we found that it's not just the amount of debt that matters. Students' financial expectations about needing a higher income actually have a stronger influence on their decision, which means that students are not only reacting to the debt they currently have, but also to how they think about their future financial situation. And this leads to career choices being more focused on financial security, and it can also increase stress and anxiety about life after graduation. Thank you, and any questions?